We are here with Lou Rosenfeld. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
I want to start by asking you, why is it so hard for people to sponsor user experience research?
No, I mean, there's the obvious issues of things like the ROI isn't so clear. I think it's changing. I think people are getting a little smarter about that. But ultimately, looking at user research is a hard thing for anyone to do. It's sort of a function of listening. And humans are just terrible at listening. Mm-hmm. So, we're really bad doing that face-to-face. Although I'm listening to you right now, trust me. But when you then present someone who's not directly involved in the work, let's say a decision maker, with something that was done maybe a while ago, maybe a week, maybe a month, maybe 6 months ago, in a context that's unfamiliar to them, where they may have even forgotten why it was being done in the first place. We're asking a lot of people. It's not very well contextualized. So we're asking them to pay attention in a way that's very unnatural. And I think that's always going to be a problem. It's always going to be a problem. And probably the thing that's going to help the most is when people with experience in whatever it might be, user research, voice of the customer work, market research, who've had to do that kind of direct listening and maybe have had to even structure it, set it up, do some sort of study of some sort, when they become the decision makers, when they move up the chain inside organizations, that's probably when it's going to start getting a little easier and a little better. But it's always going to be hard, even for those people who haven't been directly involved. Once they become senior decision makers, we're asking them to do something really unnatural.
You said something like people are getting smarter about it. So that in my...
Or more experienced might be a better way to put it.
You mean the researchers themselves or the stakeholders?
The decision makers, partly because they're exposed to it more, partly because they see it as an increasingly important thing in terms of competitive advantage.
So you see
but
that
it's still
as
unnatural.
But you see that as a good thing that they're getting smarter about it, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. But I still think it's always going to be hard for people.
All right. Okay. Anything you want to ask me?
Oh, so much, Tomer, so much. So one of the things that I find, I work with a lot of large organizations, and like Fortune 500s, so forth. They tend to be distributed geographically. They tend to be made up of many silos. They tend to do their work like anyone in a fairly asynchronous way. You can't always get everyone together at the same time to think about the same issues and make decisions about the same issues. Now, this is not so much a user research question for you, but I wonder if there's any tricks that you find that help close the gap, the geographic gap, the temporal gap, so that people can actually be do efficient work and be making good decisions because they're actually talking to each other and listening to each other at the same time, despite how spread out they might be and what time zones they might be in.
So, as you were asking, I was thinking to myself how many companies I worked for had, very many offices around the world, and I can remember two, including the one I work for now. So I'm talking about companies with more than, let's say, 100 offices around the world. And I don't want to answer, the obvious answers of, video conferencing, travel there, or things like that. I want to bring it back to user experience research. And the trick I found to be working well for me, and it works well when you have distributed offices and when decision makers are far away from you. I quote unquote use other people, and these proxies are extremely helpful. I think it's much more effective when a software engineer or a product manager is sharing research results with their own kind, and when the decision
dangerous probably in some ways too, right?
I don't think so. I mean, my experience is that it's 100% success.
Okay.
When they are working with me on research, they're heavily involved in everything that's going on, they are a part of it. And they want to share the results, they care about the results. So they will passionately present them to decision makers. And that's extremely, effective.
Sure, but doesn't that also mean now you have to have a whole bunch more people to bring into the process, educate?
Probably.
And I imagine you have to be pretty selective. Part of how you select them probably has something to do with what skin in the game they have. What are their incentives to do this? It's not always something people are going to want to do. They're not going to always want to be your proxy.
First of all, I now have, the right to not work with people who don't appreciate research. So I don't work with these people. I only work with teams and people, and I must say this is what I have here, fortunately. I only work with people who want research, who appreciate it and understand what it can do for them, how it can support, make them heroes. And when that's the case, yes.
So what's the
I need more time.
test?
I need more time
Right.
to educate them. But
Part of the work.
I see that as a good thing.
So what's the litmus test for, I'm going to work with you, but you're not someone who's worth spending the time
If
with?
they specifically expressed a need for research, they come to you for help. I was tasked with, building a product. I have no idea why, what for, who are the users, and what they want. That's a good sign.
Okay. So they may not ask for research necessarily,
Yeah.
but they're curious in a way
Yeah.
that may mean they're open to it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And, when people are not of the kind that would work with you, they're never going to ask that.
All right.
All right. I have more questions for you, but I want to ask them as I planned. So let me read the next one to you. What would you recommend to in-house UX researchers who are always trying to identify opportunities for impactful research if they want to better identify such opportunities?
So how to actually better identify the opportunities specifically?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I get the question, and I think one of the so I'm on the outside. I'm a consultant. I've never been in-house except in my own business.
That's why I ask you.
Right. And what I see is one of the real problems for people who are doing user research in-house is that they don't always realize it, but they're located within silos. And so you have someone doing kind of very standard HCI research over here. And then you have someone just doing incredible work with analytics over there. And there's somebody else doing market research over there, and so on and so forth. And you get all these silos. And I think the problem that they're having, and why maybe the opportunities aren't so obvious, is because that work doesn't ever get synthesized. So, here you have HCI people figuring out, why things are the way they are, but maybe their agenda isn't well informed by the analytics. Analytics people, on the other hand, are really good at figuring out what is going on, but can't really dig into the hard questions about why things are the way they are. Now, that's just two examples, but in many contexts and where I work, there's many silos like that all have sort of their own branding, their own disciplinary foundations, their own unique perspectives, and so they go do their research in their silos, and they do it for years and years, just like they were taught how to do it, whatever graduate school they went to, and they have their blinders on. And so what I really recommend people consider doing, who are doing user research of one flavor or another, is to look for other people doing user research of a different flavor. I always like the story of, I think Samantha Starmer, over at REI, who is one of the UX people very responsible for a lot of the research going on there, who says what she's done is this crazy thing. She left the building where she works on the REI campus, walked across the campus to the building where the market research people are, and hung out in their lunchroom and looked for people to meet and have conversations with. That is one example of what people should be doing, is getting outside their damn silos. That's when you start identifying interesting opportunities where your research ends, or it just doesn't go far enough and can't really, but has a nice, gentle, complementary nature with another pocket of research that's going on in the organization. A lot of decision makers aren't really good at that. They're not good at putting together those pieces. They're not really good at synthesizing. They're missing a lot of opportunities. But you know what you know, and you know what you don't know. Who knows what you don't know? Find them in your organization. See how the pieces fit. Present, in effect, a dashboard of user research to your senior management. That's where synthesis will start happening, and when synthesis happens, that's when you get insight. That's when it's actually worth spending all this money on user research of whatever flavor we're talking about, because that's when you get actual insight.
I recently interviewed Klaus Kasgaard. You know him? From
Klaus who?
Kasgaard. He's,
yeah.
Formerly from Yahoo.
Yeah.
Now works for Intuit.
Yeah.
And he's a great proponent of having one research department with market research and user research and all of that. And that's one of the things that he preaches, and he talks about that in the interview. So
well, I'm looking forward to that. Is that available now?
Not
okay. But look at it this way: if you were going to design a large organization from scratch and you had a clean slate, would you put all the quantitative people in this pocket separate from those qualitative people over there and so on? Absolutely not. What you're trying to do with user research is basically informed decision making. You're trying to create an organizational brain. And instead what we've done is we've chopped that all up into little pieces that have, well, essentially evolved organically. And it's totally irrational. It makes absolutely no sense, but we're inside it. So as an outsider, I see this all the time. As an insider, it's, not only do we not necessarily see it, but we're not incented to go have lunch with someone across campus.
I agree. I mean, decision makers, executives sometimes have legitimate questions for research, but they don't know which department does what because of the different methodologies.
Right.
And they shouldn't care, actually. So.
Well, but on the other hand, those are the people that are spending a lot of money to run their businesses, and they need information, not just data, not just information, but they need insight. And they're not seeing the connection between all this research and actual insight, or they're not benefiting from it in the way they should. So they're responsible as well. And I think the really smart organizations are the ones that actually are starting to see that you have to look at this as a whole collective undertaking. Yeah, maybe different parts are in different places with people from different backgrounds doing the work. But you have to put them together. You have to create an environment for synthesis as a decision maker.
All right. I'm hearing from UX practitioners that research is usually the first thing to make it out of a project proposal, either from consultants, from agencies, and in-house practitioners. So much so that some of them stopped even offering it and just design based on assumptions. How do you position UX research to your clients, to your stakeholders, to prevent this from happening?
Well, one of the things is, all right, so there's different contexts that you're talking about. And it's hard for me to talk too much about the in-house side of things, except to basically rehash what I was just saying a moment ago, which is if you're doing it in an isolated way, or you're hoping to do it, but you're doing it in a way that doesn't kind of show the value to the organization strategically, then it's not surprising. And that strategic value comes from connecting what you're doing to what other people are doing and showing the whole picture. It's a hard thing to do, but that's what you have to do. If you are someone who is on the outside, like at an agency, for example, I think part of the problem is that the business model of agencies is fundamentally broken and in many respects unethical, because the people selling the work aren't necessarily very close to the work, don't necessarily understand the work. They're a lot like the clients in that regard, so they're not able to make a good case for doing the research. And the business model is to bill the most for the most junior people. You can put on the project and get away with it. And this is like, I think in that type of business model, this sort of less clear value, fuzzier ROI type of stuff, not only is harder to sell to clients, but it's hard for them to see the value of internally. Not all agencies are like this. Not all agencies are evil, but I do think there's a lot of evil in that business model. And so this stuff gets cut out. Really not surprising. Then finally, I think there's a a kind of a good thing. I don't mean to be so negative. I think there's actually a positive thing, which is that there's a generational change going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think people who are younger tend to be more natural synthesizers than old guys like you and me. So
No, I'm old. Okay.
you're very old.
All right.
Certainly for our field. I hate to break it to you. And I'm probably older. But I'm certainly grayer. But anyway, so I think there's this issue of generational change in that people who are younger, when they studied the field, if they studied it at all, it was more open and fluid than when you and I were in grad school and we were taught what we were taught by our specific discipline, and we weren't necessarily encouraged to go outside of our discipline. Yeah, you want to go outside, fine, but first of all, you got to read these journals from our field. You got to go to these annual conferences from our field. These are the tools and methods we use in our field. And the other stuff, we don't really know about. We were kind of encouraged in many respects, I think, to have blinders on.
Mm-hmm.
And the university education model unfortunately reinforces that. And so I think the heavy lifting that a lot of us did in terms of looking beyond what we were trained to know and do is a big deal. And we should all pat ourselves on the back, but now get the hell out of the way. Because younger people, I think, are more natural at not being so disciplinarily biased. And they just, I think, tend to sample whatever makes sense from all these different perspectives. They already see this UX milieu that's already inherently interdisciplinary.
Mm-hmm.
And they say, all right, well, I don't necessarily, I'm not an HCI person from CMU who graduated in 1990. I'm who I am now. And I just think they're more natural at doing, or at sampling from whatever discipline provides value to them at the moment. And then, because they're doing that, I think they're better at synthesis. So I'm hopeful for that reason. Now, I have a feeling your bullshit meter is going off the charts here.
I can't stop thinking about, one thing that I heard. I don't hear that anymore, but I heard in the past from clients, from stakeholders. When I proposed research, they were saying, back when I was also a designer, now I'm not anymore, they were saying, why do we need research? Why do we need to spend money on research? You're the expert. Answer the questions and do it. So you think people are now have better expertise to answer the questions?
I do think this just sort of digital design literacy overall is higher for people who grew up with it than people who didn't. I have a hard time arguing against that. That said, do they do research in the way that you and I did? Or do, I should say. Maybe not as robustly, but I do think a lot of them have sort of a natural built-in nature of doing maybe more informal research. Maybe they don't call it research, but it's inquiry.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't know if I'm right about that. I'm basing this on anecdotal experience.
Right.
But I do think there is some kind of change going on. Maybe I didn't get it right, but maybe... But I don't know what it is, but I think people are different in the way they go about solving research and design problems today than we might have been taught how to do. And you can't really discount that change.
All right.
I'm waiting for more of a refutation. I have a feeling there's one just beneath the surface there, and that's fine.
No. I'm just wondering. I'm trying to connect that with what I see every day.
Yeah.
Anything else you want to talk about?
No. What's for lunch?
We'll see in a minute. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Pleasure.
And we'll see what happens with these statements. Thanks.
Don't hold me to it. All right. Thank you.